I would like to express my thanks to the organizers. It's a great honor to be here, not only in this fabulous library, but also to be in Ooty. In this first round, I am going to just pick a group of diverse poems. And I will begin with a poem which was inspired by what I consider to be probably the finest single sculpture in the world, and that is the Didarganj Yakshi, which is currently in the new museum at Patna. And some of you are aware of that, but if not, I hope that that is one sculpture you can discover and enjoy. This is, in a sense, in the voice of the, not in her voice, but a kind of conversation with that. The name of the poem is Our Lady of Didarganj. Not that anyone bothered even when you were a working woman, but who did you come home to when the jinnah succumbed to stupor? Where is your lover? What of your child? Only the triple welts below your navel, under your chin remain as forensic presence. Who unfastened your jewelry? Who found solace at your breasts? A stone mummy now, lady, you are the stuff of museum wear. Just to say that Didarganj Yakshi is a lady who has a whisk in her, in one hand, which is a kind of fly whisk. Every stroke releases a whiff of sandalwood. From the carved stem, the whisk snaps air, scattered on a snare, drums into the Tirthankara's ear, keeping him free from flies and Shravakas. She remembers the love of her life. Once they stood pole position, right and left, in a sacred pantomime of synchronized supplicants. Her analog has moved, pearl patina ground to homeopathic grain, leaving her centuries as compensation and a riverbed to soothe her spine with eddies and lave her tresses with silt. Did you summon up the eons, lady, even as the soles of your feet refuse to flex despite the iambic whiplash of soiled linen? You kept your shine even when waylaid for a dhobi's stone. Like unmarked fields in an apothecary, you now keep intimacies. I presume nothing. I can scatter syntagms like chaff. My amateur hands can ravage middens in minutes. You offer me nothing but your grace that holds me at bay. This other poem is also inspired by a series of paintings, and I have to thank Ranjit for this, for asking for a reading during a wonderful, wonderful exhibition of paintings by Sakti Burman. And his paintings are so enjoyable and joyful, and that is the title of this poem. Filled vessels make joyful noise. In the beginning, there are good manners. In this ship of many mansions and sound stages, day traders rub shoulders with deities, defer to vassals and the scullery help. Sorry, they say, thank you, or oh, hello. Demigods and spies, jokers and thieves make up the quorum in the collegium, allow themselves to be arranged fore and aft by the man with a bolus of color and a spit gun. With this material corpus of divinity and danavas, mythologies are crunched and sealed like muesli and raisins in a granola bar, packed with sucrose and the potential energy to power floodlights for the mise-en-scène, while below deck, vahanas are valet parked. Unless needed to populate the tableau. Peacocks, mice, bullocks, and parrots mumble good-naturedly, filling the hull in compacts of camaraderie. Gods can, on occasion, be acceptable role models. Kartikeya, Adam, Apollo, and Anubis lift squirming grandchildren into laps, adjust angavastrams, scepters, sacks, and smiles. The bearded man drags spectacles down his nose, and then suddenly it's holy everywhere. Just to continue with this little idea of how mythologies kind of infiltrate our living space. This next poem is from a series of poems I had written. The first one was written on the first day that George Bush had ordered the bombing of Baghdad. And then I kind of wrote a poem every day, and the last one was when Baghdad fell. And then I was doing a little bit of, reading into what was happening there and the background of things and all that. And one of the very interesting figures that emerge as probably apocryphal, but a name that is of relevance to the people in Baghdad is the name of Morgina. And I suppose you remember Morgina from the Arabian Nights and the story of Ali Baba and the 40 thieves. So Morgina is a heroine in Baghdad because I think she becomes a symbol of resistance. So this set of poems I ultimately kind of called Morgina's Daughters, and I'd like to read that poem to you. This was written towards the end, when things were almost certain that the city is going to fall. Morgina's Daughters. When every voice rises raucous to embrace the interminable pleasures of heaven with violent certainty, they chose the subtle probability of life. Through hard times, through Iran and Kuwait, through the decade of embargo, they aspire to the glory days of Harun al-Rashid. They secrete stratagem in veils of soul, develop dexterity in the democracy of the backroom. Morgina's daughters pick up their weapons of choice, design a defense to be fought on a battlefield of their making. They understand, long before husbands and brothers do, that the limited avenues of staying alive are infinitely preferable to the long twilight of the hereafter. Only the menfolk stand to be served by the houris of paradise. And since the theme of the morning was freedom of expression, I thought I could read you a poem which would come from the other end. This is a poem called Effigy Maker. And this is addressed to the maker of effigies, which at one time was quite popular. We don't see them so often now. But I'm sure in 2019, well, you will next year, I'm sure. Effigy Maker. Build me a torso to set alight, haute couture to burn all night. If you are half the tailor you are cut out to be. Choose fabric that is retentive and slick. Make your stuffing bleed. Let 1,000 cuts a love for 1,000 wicks. Pay attention to extremities. Keep the digits dry and pudgy. Stuff well with cotton ball and rags. Matchstick heads with broader shoulders so that when they burn, they smolder and don't skimp on the number of flags. You are overworked, I know, but for this I can pay more. It is a season of burning and I'm earning credit with every inferno. Thank you.
Shahid, Agha Shahid Ali, the Kashmiri American poet who was such an inspiration to many of us, always used to say that the one thing he missed in Anglophone readings was that no one said "va," or "va va" even. And he would sort of say, I wish I could hear that. Yes, applause, yeah. But, yeah, thinking of him, doesn't one, of all of these poets who fed into our own work and who remain alive for us over the decades. But I'm going to come back to what I have to do here. This poem is called Wolf, and I thought I would read it because it's been amazing for the last few days to be immersed in the world of the hunt with these trophies looking down at us. I would like to think a certain sense of, why did you do this? Wolf. But this is set not here, but in the American Midwest. Wolf. A wolf snarls in the sumac-stripped darkness. Across the snow-driven prairie that is a famine of trust, a man steps from his cabin, cocks his rifle in reply. His boots sink and the ice swirls around him. The wolf wades into his eyes. Teach me to cleave the steel-jawed pain. Take my words, give me memories of smell. Charred pine, first blooded fir, dying elk. Time gets the hunter in the end, freezes his bones among the stars. But you will never be flaunted, a trapper's crippled exhibit. A fanged hunger, you will survive. Oh my goodness, I thought I cued you rather shrewdly. Oh my goodness. Okay, staying in this vein of the animal world, but thinking also of how animals sometimes can act as symbols, but they can also speak to you in very precise ways when you're thinking of a human situation. And this next poem is called Giant Malabar Squirrel, and it came about when we were in Sri Lanka, in a very fragile moment of ceasefire in 2002. There is now a very permanent ceasefire achieved by rather drastic methods, as you all know. But this was a standoff. And somehow the thoughts of what we sensed about the political situation kind of mapped themselves onto this encounter with an animal. It's a giant Malabar squirrel, Anuradhapura. Large and motionless as a jackfruit about to fall, he hung off the banyan for minutes, head pointing earthward, unmindful of gravity and the body's natural justice. Brush-tailed ambassador of the higher branches, his back unblessed by the triple stripe of Rama's grateful fingers, his stare a declaration of war. He ignored the shelled nuts and coconut flesh that we held out, waited for us to back off, climb back on the bus that had brought us there. Through our tinted windows, we saw him blur down the bark and spring, forepaws gripping the earth, nostrils dilated for hostile smells. Behind his bristling tail, the stupa rose, chalk white, ripe in the center of our eyes, blinding at noon. I seem to have military matters on the brain at this point. But this refers to another conflict zone. And again, Shanta, as you were speaking this morning, it occurred to me that, in fact, there are parts of this republic which have known these conditions for decades. Some of our fellow citizens who've lived under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act since the 1950s, others who live in even more peculiar conditions. So this is set in Kashmir. This is called Reading a Script at Ziyarat Dastgir Sobun. Ziyarat Dastgir is was one of the most beautiful Sufi shrines in the valley. It burned down a few years ago and has been rebuilt in a not very happy way. Reading a Script at Ziyarat Dastgir Sobun, Srinagar, 2005. Proverbs fall from the saint's upturned bowl. Beneath the cypress, work is a steel-grey word, thought is plum, and prayer a mournful green. A cube with 3 lacquered walls and a broken face holds them together. The almond merchant shuffles past the lake without humming. The singer hides his voice under a scarf. The guide won't admit to his compass. They're actors in a long-running movie about comets, in which a pair of hands wash themselves at a fountain over and over, the soundtrack worn out, silence dripping from the stripped chinar and the charred roof to the headstones buried in snow. I seem to be playing the jaltarang with these books, if anyone remembers this peculiar musical instrument. The refugee pauses in flight. Most of us today are in a condition of being either intellectual refugees in a certain way or very, very actual refugees in conditions of incredible suffering. And that's when you think of how one narrative, one very strong narrative within modernity is the forced displacement of people. And that's something that's preyed on me for a very long time. Also partly because I belong to an ethnic group that is diasporic and has moved several times over the centuries. So this is called The Refugee Pauses in Flight, and it's dedicated to a mentor figure, a marvelous novelist who I've turned to often over the years. This is the Somali novelist, Nuruddin Farah. So The Refugee Pauses in Flight for Nuruddin Farah. What should I call it, this number that has no name? Countries are working hypotheses that sometimes fail. I escaped from mine, my wings of flame doused, my route sketched in rumors, an alphabet of stone and diesel tapping at my ribs. Invented reasons found in a drawer of mislaid knives. Never look back, not even at the veined marble columns, the coiling creepers, the rusty sea gate, the orange tree, all that you thought was you. Even the briefest glance over the shoulder could turn you to salt on a photograph. Pick up the keyring, slowed by its bunch of yellowed date tags. Where to draw the borders of the occupied city, across brain lobes that sleep while fingers twitch in spasms, across tents that shiver and capsize on a frozen beach, across graves on which the wild basil has grown. Living among strangers, he almost forgot the names of his gods. As I said, I really do seem to have military matters in the brain this morning. This comes from the very simple realization that we are constantly under surveillance, not only from our local administrations here, but literally from up there. You don't know who's looking down at you. And this came out of a conversation with a colleague, Teju Cole, the Nigerian-American novelist, and he was talking about a work of art which actually replicates this condition of what happens when a drone is looking down at you, and can you look back? So Night Sky and Counting for Teju Cole. You are in the dark, looking up at constellations and shooting stars, finding traces of adobe roofs and walls at the eye's radium rim while grass tickles your back. You notice some celestial objects move faster than others, sorting red shift from blue note. You are the samurai of wide open spaces. They scan you. In their eyes, you're a ninja, betrayed by body heat. You're that gray, glowing to orange smear in minutes. You could evaporate, leaving heat shadow printed on the ground to mark the spot. You thought you were the subject, the locus of consciousness. When the shooting stars look down, they see an object with eyes, a moving threat, under the black mirror at which you point, to finger-link faint trails that might be a hunter, his belt, his faithful dogs, or a raven, a boar, or a river of eyes. You have no cover. You are in the dark. Thank you for your attention.
This poem is called Eggs, and it's subtitled Scenes from the RMU. The RMU stands for Reproductive Medicine Unit. Even the most hard-boiled man, fried in the heat of a no-frills space, filled with memories and promises of babies who need to be coddled, is scrambled like a well-made breakfast. His wife is cooking for them a delicious, worrisome omelette that's been basted in an impersonal, I-can't-be-bothered industrial steel kitchen, full of poached dreams and aspirations and deviled by an addled brain. Unwilling children are smoked out by the tantalizing promise of life always